We're live.
Okay. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our last Group Insurance Commission meeting. I want to welcome constituents, members, anyone who's watching on YouTube. I also want to thank all the commissioners for the last year, as well as the GIC staff for continuing to persevere despite sometimes less than ideal conditions for serving our members. So hello, everyone. I'm Valerie Sullivan. I'm chair of the Group Insurance Commission, and we have commissioners here today: Bobby Kaplan, designee Cassandra Roder, designee Rebecca Butler, Adam Chapdelaine, Toby Choate, Christy Clenard, Joe Gentile, Eileen McEnany, Elizabeth Shabbat, Melissa Murphy Rodriguez, Timothy Sullivan, Tamara Davis, Patricia Jennings, and Jane Edmonds. So thank you all. At this point, I'm going to open up the meeting with a motion to accept the minutes from our November 18th meeting. And I'd like to hear a motion.
So moved.
Okay.
Seconded.
So I had seconded from Bobby. I thought Jane was the first, or Christy. So in that case, I will ask Andrew to take roll call for votes. I will vote yay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Vice Chair Kaplan,
Yay.
Designee Roder,
Yay.
Designee Butler,
Yay.
Commissioner Shabbat,
Yay.
Commissioner Chapdelaine,
Aye.
Commissioner Choate,
Yes.
thank you, Commissioner Clenard,
Aye.
Commissioner Davis,
Aye.
Commissioner Gentile,
Yes.
Commissioner McEnany,
Aye.
Commissioner Jennings,
Yes.
Commissioner Murphy Rodriguez,
Yes.
Commissioner Edmonds,
Aye.
Commissioner Tim Sullivan,
Yes.
and that is the unanimous vote of all present.
All right. Thank you, Andrew. I also should have brought up at the beginning of the meeting that I am here in the new space of the GIC. It's a beautiful office space in the McCormick building on Ashburton Place. And in the absence of not having the staff here fully, I am feeling very safe. And the space is beautiful. So can't wait to have all of us together again. I also want to welcome back Emily. So Emily, congrats and welcome back. And I'm sure we'll hear more about all staff issues from Matt. So at this point, I'll turn it over to Matt.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, members of the Commission and the public. Thank you all for joining us. We have a fairly light agenda here today in terms of number of topics, but the topics themselves, of course, are not light. I do anticipate that we will finish up a little bit early. Normally go till 10:30. It looks like we'll probably go till 10 today. The two primary substantive topics today, other than our normal regular business, we will have Vince Kane from Willis Towers Watson, our actuarial consultant, who will present on our preliminary rates for our fiscal year 23 coverage. As you, I suspect, know by now, that this is the beginning of a three-stage process of us determining rates and plan design for the annual enrollment that will begin in the spring for coverage effective in July. So we will wrap that up at our March meeting. And we'll also have Mike Berry, our Director of Government Affairs, provide an update on our municipal insurance portfolio and provide some excellent updates there. And move on to calendar, please. Okay, so of course, as the chair noted, this is the last meeting of our calendar. Oh, sorry. Somebody have a question? No. It's the last meeting of calendar year 21. We have taken the opportunity of it being a year that's been somewhat light on the procurement side, where we wrapped up our life and LTD procurements in the early part of the year, and have taken advantage of that to explore with you in pretty significant amount of detail the challenges that we're looking to tackle as we work towards the fiscal year 2024 procurement. Next slide. So here we have our projected 2022 calendar just around the corner. This slide is actually unchanged from the one that we presented to you in our November meeting, so I won't spend a lot of time on it. But as I noted, we will go through the regular rate and plan development phases in the early part of the year. We will also be presenting in January with our out-of-pocket report, building off of the prior work that we've done on this to include some additional data points. Margaret Ann Schutz and Lauren Makashima are busy at work preparing for that. Also preparing for our listening sessions, which I'll speak about more in a moment. As we note here, we'll have a presentation scheduled in February and or March regarding our procurement strategy in preparation for the release of our request for responses. I do just want to also note here that mixed in between all of the work around procurement and rate development, we will begin discussions with the Commission in March around our employee assistance program, Mass for You, which is on the same procurement cycle as the rest of the of our health benefit and pharmacy benefit. So that we'll have to weave that into the work this year as well. So with that, happy to take any questions on our projected calendar. All right.
I'm sure people are interested in the dates for the listening session, so I'm sure you're getting to those, right?
Yep. Those are in the director's report, so I'll speak to those. So in the written director's report, which came along with your packet last week, you'll see a variety of updates. I'll just pull out a few. I'll start with what the chair noted at the top of the meeting, which we have the return of our Chief of Staff, Emily Williams, from her maternity leave. And she's has a beautiful new baby daughter named Zara, who is just adorable. We're thrilled to have Emily back. I want to thank Erica Shabelli, our Deputy Executive Director, for filling in and sort of doing double duty while Emily was out. So thank you, Erica. I also want to thank Tansy Helmke, our executive assistant, who came in just as Emily was going on break. Without the two of them, with so much going on, it would have been really hard to keep all the trains running on time. I will also note that Tansy came to us as a temporary employee, and we were thrilled to be able to say that we're actually retaining her on staff into a permanent full-time position as a paralegal on Indra Stern's team. So she'll continue to provide really important support for the staff here. And so we will be proceeding to fill that executive assistant role and really kind of rethinking it along the way. Just to make sure that we're taking full advantage of the skill set that we're hoping to get. Also in the HR space, I just note we have 2 open positions. I think we've shared some of these details with commissioners before. 2 office support specialist positions in the operations unit. We will make sure that you have details on those, and I encourage members of the commission to share those with your networks. On the communication side, as the chair noted, I'm sure there's interest in the public listening sessions. We had last year, of course, we had to do our first listening sessions remotely, and the participation that we had from our membership was really leaps and bounds beyond the levels of engagement that we had with in-person meetings. Of course, we will, given the path of the ongoing pandemic, we are planning to again do our public listening sessions in a virtual fashion. We have noted in the director's report the 3 dates that we have that we are proposing. So it's Tuesday, January 25th at 6 p.m., Wednesday, January 26th at 12 noon, and Friday, January 28th at 8:30 a.m. So what we're trying to do is different times of the day and evening, different days of the week to accommodate the varying work schedules of our membership that would like to listen in and provide feedback. Maybe I'll just complete the director's report, and then if there's comments on that or anything else, I'm happy to take them. So in the legislative update, you'll see an element in there that addresses a GIC 101 legislative briefing that we conducted, which was our first ever. And this was a part of our broader element to a broader strategy to engage with our commission, engage with the legislature as we prepare for the procurement. But this was open to anyone in the legislature, members, staff, and we actually had over 50 participants in that meeting, including a dozen members of the legislature. So very successful. We used it as an opportunity to sort of give a high-level overview of the GIC and how we function, and also lay out much of what we've laid out to you all about our developing strategy for the procurement. And then finally, just note under the engagement updates, I participated in a teletown hall hosted by Mass Retirees. I want to thank Sean Duhamel and Frank Valeri and Nancy McGovern and the rest of the team there. Those are always very enjoyable for me. I think we had over 2,000 retirees on the phone, just a fantastic back and forth dialogue with our retirees. So I always look forward to that. So we have a lot more going on the engagement side, but I will stop there, and I'm happy to take questions or feedback on anything in the director's report.
I don't see any hands up. I wonder if there's any nuggets of information or top questions that the retirees asked that you could share with us, anything that will help inform our thinking for the upcoming procurement.
Lots of questions about Medicare and our thinking around the Medicare portfolio of plans. I would say there was expressed a high degree of satisfaction with the current offerings and options. There, you know, as we've heard from others who represent our members, there was expressed a good deal of sensitivity to changes in plan design, changes to cost sharing in particular. So we had a number of inquiries around our retiree dental plans. Those are the, I think, the highlights that come to mind for me. I would say, in addition to that town hall, we are also in very regular touch with Sean and Frank and the team there. So I think as we come back to you to talk about our strategy in more detail early in 2022, that will be the sort of feedback, Madam Chair, that we'll be able to give in a little bit more detail.
No, that's great. Well, thank you for that engagement with a very important constituency, within the GIC. So glad to see you doing that. Thank you.
We've also had really good meetings with multiple meetings, really work streams with Executive Office of Health and Human Services and Mass Health. The Health Policy Commission's been very helpful to us. We've had really productive meetings with the Mass Medical Society, some initial discussions with the Mass Hospital Association and a number of specific provider systems. We'll be meeting with the Mass Association of Health Plans and representatives of our carriers over the coming months. So there's a lot that's happening in the engagement space, and we're really looking forward to being able to come back to you with some more detail about what we're learning.
We promised people we'd get them out early, and
Yep.
So I should not be so loquacious.
All right. That concludes the Executive Director's report. At this point, I'm happy to turn it over to Vince Kane from Willis Towers Watson. And again, I just want to thank Vince and Jeff Levenshires and the rest of the Willis team. We are very well supported in many ways by Willis Towers Watson, not least of which is in the area of the development of our rates. I would say this year, as last year was, has been an especially challenging year with a wide variety of many uncertain variables that it makes it very hard to project accurately what our trend is likely to be. COVID certainly being one, but that's not the only one. So I just want to thank them for their really excellent work and hand it over to Vince to walk through his presentation.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Matt, and good morning, Madam Chair and Commissioners. I'm Vince Kane. I'm the Senior Actuary in the Health and Benefits team at Willis Towers Watson. And today is sort of the first step in the FY23 rate development process. If we can move on to the next slide. I guess we're here today for a lot of reasons, but I'm here today to walk through our development of the FY23 budget, which does represent sort of the average full cost premium increase that we expect for FY23 at this time for what we call sort of status quo plan offerings and plan designs. So, we look at the same set of health plan and pharmacy benefit manager partners. We look at the same set of plans and we update our projections, based on the most recent claims experience and incorporating a number of actuarial assumptions and trend assumptions that we work with the health plan partners to develop for, moving the claims experience from FY21, which is the most recent period we look at, forward to FY23. So the full cost premium itself represents the projected medical and pharmacy claims plus administrative fees and other non-claims based charges and fees that are expected to be incurred for all the members covered by the GIC. So that full cost premium ends up getting split so that there's a member premium or a share of the premium that's paid. It does not include out-of-pocket costs. So deductibles and co-pays and other point of care cost sharing elements. For the most part, the plans are self-insured. So we are not, negotiating rates with the health plans, except, there's one plan that's still fully insured, and that's a Medicare Advantage medical premium. That's part of the Tufts Medicare Preferred plan. So, since these plans are self-insured, we collect the claims experience and we effectively built out our projections to come up with what we believe is a reasonable premium to meet the expected costs incurred by GIC members for FY23. If we could move on to the next slide. This is a slide that I think we've shown for a couple of years now. It's a preliminary view at the average increase that we're expecting at this point for what we just defined as the status quo pricing result for FY23. And if you draw your attention to the center, 5.7%, which we're noting is the expected aggregate increase for the GIC, that is a blend of all the non-Medicare plans as well as the Medicare plans at this point in time. And so we are illustrating a range because it is not final yet. But we've got certain next steps related to finalizing plan design changes, voting them in, and also coming up with our best projections of pharmacy rebates and improvements under those contract terms, as well as finalizing specific items like the Medicare Advantage renewal. So at the top of the slide, there's a range that we're calling the market benchmark of 5 to 7%. It's the same range that we had last year. And, within that range, for example, we survey our clients and develop estimates for what they're seeing for self-funded plan sponsor premium increases for 2021 and 2022. We administer this best practices survey. And for 2021, surveyed respondents, there were about 400 clients covering 6 million employee lives. For 2021, the average increase was 6%. And for 2022, it's expected to be 5.4%. So, in that range, that's commercial. So that, that doesn't include any Medicare lives effectively in that surveyed range. As another point of reference, when we looked at our trend assumption that we're applying to move the FY21 complete claims experience forward, the weighted average trend factor after incorporating all of the responses from the health plans and the PBMs is 6.4%. So that's kind of the beginning point for moving the experience forward. However, we did note in updating our models that trends are emerging higher, both for FY21 to 22, which we originally, asked the plans about that trend factor last year. That's gone up about a percentage point for medical. And also for trends for FY22 to 23, which were about a half a point higher than the previous year trends. So we are seeing an uptick in expected costs in working with the plans, which in part is likely due to expected cost due to the pandemic moving forward to FY23.
Hey, Vince.
Yes.
We have a question from Toby.
Question, Vince, and you may have just explained it, but how do you account for, kind of what's the emerging inflation, which appears to be,
right,
real and will continue probably to accelerate to some degree. So how does that get accounted for? Because that's not as perspective.
Yeah, we are noticing, in CPI, particularly released by the Bureau of Labor Statistics, some inflationary pressure on the medical basket of goods.
Yeah.
Especially, in October, we're starting to see an uptick. Overall, for the 12-month period, CPI medical, as it's called, is running lower than the historical average. But if it were to continue at what we were seeing emerging most recently, it would, speak to a fairly large trend component associated with that. And I would say that in our trend assumptions that we collected from the health plans, about 50% of the trend factor is related to unit cost pressure. And I think there is an expectation that there will be upward pressure on unit costs from providers and hospitals who, are citing higher needs around PPE and managing COVID cases. Not to mention there's just overall higher costs due to vaccines, boosters, testing, et cetera, on top of sort of everything else that represents a normal year of claims experience. And another question?
See our Vice Chair.
Yeah, Bobby has her hand up.
Sorry, I have a question regarding the pharmaceuticals. Do you anticipate also a similar increase with the PBMs or?
Pharmacy trend has been running higher than medical trends. So we are looking at, high single digit cost growth for the CVS and ESI gross claims. Fortunately, a lot of that gross cost pressure is offset by improvements in rebates as a result of the, GIC RFP that was conducted and market check improvements that occur over time. But at this point, I think we're, projecting out into year 5 of the PBM contracts when we're looking at FY23. And so a lot of the, I think, initial increase that resulted from the RFPs done years ago has, kind of fallen off, and we're looking at a return to sort of normal overall trends.
The pharmacy trend is incorporated in this projected overall trend.
That's right.
Okay, so that's important, Bobby. So this trend that we see in front of us includes pharmacy.
Yes.
And it's
Thank you.
blended with the medical. And so it's a combination of, in aggregate, what the two, pharmacy and medical together will yield for rates coming up.
Yes, and in addition to improved rebates and discounts on pharmacy for the CVS PBM, which administers the Med Sup plans and the Medicare Advantage plan, we also get expectations of federal subsidies related to Part D coverage. It's called, EGWP, Employee Group Plan, and those subsidies are fairly material, and they go up, consistent with how our gross claims costs increase, and to grow at a faster rate, which helps to offset the premium increases. And those subsidies are built into the working rates.
Yep. All right, Vince, I don't see anybody else's hand up, so you can continue.
Well, I see Toby's hand. I don't know if he's got another question or that's just from before.
Oh,
No, I'll
Toby.
take it now.
Okay.
No other questions.
So it's a holdover.
And I know in the past, we've received questions around, whether this is representative of the Massachusetts market. Is this out of bounds? It's high, which we, had initially developed some projections that were coming in lower. But as a point of reference, looking at the market, and specifically the merged market in Massachusetts, from 2020 to 2021, and I think we spoke to this last year, the average increase for the individual and small group market in Massachusetts, which is insured, it's insured business, was 7.9%. And, based on recent board meetings at the Massachusetts Health Connector and rates that were approved by the DY for 2022, that number is looking like 6.9%. So again, that's sort of a different market. It's fully insured, and we're looking at self-insured projections here, but consistent high premium pressure, as evidenced by that. And I know it's just a corroborating point, but in the ballpark of what we're looking at here, they're a little bit higher.
I will just add a few items towards the end here. In addition to the concerns about where inflation goes, I would say that, one of the challenges that our healthcare delivery system is facing now is really acute labor shortage. Much of that, I think, related to COVID and the pressures on healthcare providers related to COVID, but not only that. We've heard that from the provider side. We've heard it from our carriers, reflected in the rate negotiations that they have ongoing. So that labor shortage is acute and very real, and something to watch very closely. I will also say, just generally here, that should this number sort of hold true and inform our premiums for fiscal year 23. That has us now 3 years in a row of increases in excess of 5%. And that was even after a year where we had in excess of 3%. So it would constitute 4 years straight of our trend exceeding the overall total healthcare expenditure benchmark that was established by the legislature in Chapter 224 and monitored by the Health Policy Commission. So these are troubling trends, and they're not sustainable trends, I would say. And so from my perspective, as we over the coming months finalize our procurement strategy, it creates for us a real level of urgency to address our underlying trends. So every percent increase, just for context, I think I may have mentioned this before, every percent increase in trend is $20 million of additional obligation for the general fund. So when we're in excess of 5%, we're in excess of an additional $100 million reliance on the general fund. And I don't want to leave aside at all that that's just part of it. The other part of that falls on our members who pay increasing premiums as well. So this is, it's noteworthy, it's troubling to me, and creates a sense of urgency for us. So I want the commission to hear that from me.
Yeah, it's definitely troubling. I'm really looking to WTW and our commission to be as innovative as possible without impacting members' health, to try to be innovative in this upcoming procurement. That would be very desirable. All right, I don't see any other questions. Oh, Bobby's got her hand up. There you go.
Yes, I just wanted to say thanks, Matt, for acknowledging it. It is very troubling. And of course, the concern is, for the membership. Thanks for acknowledging that. Appreciate it.
All right.
So
Thank you. Thank you, Vince. And thank you to the Willis team again. At this point, I'm going to hand it over to Michael Berry, our Director of Government Affairs. And in his role in that title, he oversees our relationships with our municipalities. And as our commissioners know, December 1 was the deadline for municipalities to notify the GIC if they're a GIC member municipality that would like to leave, or if you're a municipality that's outside that would like to join. So we wanted to give you an update on that, and also just give you a general update on the municipal insurance portfolio. So with that, I'll hand it over to Mike.
Thank you, Matt. Good morning, commissioners, and happy holidays. I'm here this morning to update you on GIC's municipal portfolio. If we could go to the next slide, Erica. We'll begin with a listing of all the municipalities and regional school districts currently enrolled in the GIC. For the purposes of today's discussion, we're only listing those municipal and regional entities that fall within the purview of Mass General Law, Chapter 32B, which is also known as the Municipal Insurance Reform Law. We do have a number of other organizations, such as educational collaboratives and regional planning agencies, that do receive their benefits through the GIC. But those entities, when they join, they fall under a different statute, and they actually join for an indefinite period of time, and I'm not subject to the periodic renewals of these entities. couple facts that you might find interesting. Most of our municipal partners listed on this are heavily located in the northeast region of the state. We only have 3 municipal entities that are actually outside of 495, those being Munson, Northampton, and Springfield, as well as several of our regional school districts, Mohawk Trail, Hollamont, Gil Montague, and Athol Royalston, all fall outside 495 as well. You'll note that we did actually highlight the 15 municipalities and 1 regional school district that actually have enrolled in the retiree dental plan, which if you speak with anyone from the Mass Retirees Association, is an enormously popular plan among the retirees in those communities. Overall, the last several years, our portfolio has actually been very stable, which is, in my opinion, really a testament to the high value proposition for municipalities that comes with being a part of the largest insurance pool in the state. So if we could go to the next slide, Erica. Some of you have asked at prior meetings why we haven't had any new municipal members. Well, there's actually several reasons for that. The first of which is that the GIC does not actively recruit municipalities. Our role in municipal health insurance is to act as a responsive resource to communities when called upon and provide them with as much information as we can about what GIC membership means to their municipality and to their employees. And I think in my almost 4 years here, we've had countless conversations with a diverse array of regional school districts and municipalities. And so those conversations are ongoing, but we're always here in more of a support role. But the other thing that's also important to recognize that when it comes to health insurance, GIC is actually not the only game in town. In fact, far from it. Cities and towns have tremendous flexibility and choices when it comes to their providing their municipal health insurance. If we go to the second bullet, one option is other purchasing groups. There are several other purchasing groups in the state, 8 or 9, I think at last count. West Suburban Health Group was one of them. The Mayflower Health Group is another. They actually have the option of joining MIA, the Massachusetts Interlocal Insurance Agency, which is a subsidiary of the Mass Municipal Association. And they can actually, particularly some of the larger communities, can work directly with an insurance carrier. And sort of the other aspect that a lot of municipalities take advantage of is that saving money through insurance reform, you can actually do that at the local level without joining the GIC. Statute allows municipalities to replicate GIC plan design at the local level and achieve savings while preserving the ability of the unions at the local level to collectively bargain. It also allows these communities to maintain their relationship with a particular insurance carrier. And lastly, the other sort of aspect to this is sort of a reminder that when you join the GIC as a municipality, you're actually only afforded the ability to enroll in our health insurance. When the law was created back in 2007, 2008, ancillary benefits such as dental, vision, long-term disability were left out. So if you do join the GIC, you will have to procure those benefits separately, which sometimes can create an additional administrative burden.
Hey, Mike, I see that Tim has his hand up.
Oh, sure.
Sure, just a couple of quick questions. You mentioned that municipalities can only get health insurance, and that leaves out the dental and the vision and so on. Has that been a hindrance to municipalities coming in, number one? And number two, if it has been a hindrance, how do we go about changing that? That would be number one. Number two, you mentioned collective bargaining. I know one of the concerns I have always had about this particular law, and maybe you can touch upon it briefly, is that you always want union and management to enter into negotiations collaboratively. And if my understanding of the law is correct, if your municipality goes to the union and wants to negotiate over entrance into the GIC, then there's an expedited negotiation process of 30 days. And at the conclusion of that 30 days, if there is no agreement, then the municipality can unilaterally move into the GIC. And I see that as a hindrance. So how would those two issues, how can they be changed?
Sure. Thank you, Commissioner, for the question. I'll take the latter question first. So there's actually two ways that a community can enroll in the GIC. The first one, and sort of the original one, is through a public employee committee, which is made up of union representatives that are proportionate to the total number of employees in that community. The threshold for a PEC to approve entry into the GIC is actually 70%. So it's certainly considerably higher and would require a high degree of buy-in. When in 2011, 2012, when there hadn't been the response to joining the GIC that I think the legislature intended or had hoped for, some additional statutes were added in to provide some additional management tools to force a conversation, at least as it relates to health insurance. One of the aspects of that is required is that, as you did say, there is that sort of high stakes 30-day window to happen, but also baked into the law is a requirement that municipalities are required to save, to share some of their year one savings with those municipal members through the creation of a health insurance trust. So there are those two ways to happen. And again, the sort of other way is the fact that you can replicate GIC plan design at the local level. So those are all sort of baked in statute. There's no other way other than those two avenues to join the GIC. So section 19 is the public employee committee and the 70% threshold. And then chapters 21 through 23 allowed municipalities to enter into a sort of high stakes bargaining 30-day window negotiation that ultimately, if there is an impasse, there are various appeals and a state board that exists to sort of adjudicate that situation if they reach an impasse. Going back to your first question regarding the ancillary benefits, I wouldn't say it's been a hindrance in and of itself. I think certainly having the one-stop shop where, if you are with Maya, you can get a lot of all those benefits sort of all in one. I would really just call it an administrative burden more than I would a hindrance. But I certainly think there is an appeal to be able to have that one-stop shop. In order for that to be changed, there would require, excuse me, a legislative update. And there are some legislation pending on Beacon Hill that been filed by various legislators that would allow access to ancillary benefits. Those haven't been successful, obviously, but it would require a statutory change.
Yeah, thank you.
So I also see Toby has his hand up.
Mike, thank you for this information. I'm a little surprised on the third bullet, or with the third area, which is you can achieve savings. I can understand by replicating the design, but I can't believe that. I have a hard time believing that our savings wouldn't be substantially more than a smaller purchasing group. I mean, we're the biggest group in the state. It seems to me, I always thought there'd be like this big, our purchasing power, and it would be an overwhelming value proposition of savings that the municipalities could evaluate. To me, I just find, I was flabbergasted when I read it.
Yeah, I guess I would just say to that briefly, Mike, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
I think it varies by municipality, and I see Commissioner Chapdelaine has his hands up. has his hand up. I would say, municipalities regularly evaluate entering the GIC, and part of that evaluation is done through a consultant that does runs their claims through what it would look like for them to join the GIC and how it compares, right? So, and we hear from municipalities that it does vary, that the results of those analysis do vary. Some municipalities do better, perhaps because they have a better risk profile on their own and outside of the GIC. Some do better joining the GIC. So I think largely this comes down to an actuarial exercise and what does that produce in terms of greater benefit or greater cost to join the GIC. There are a variety of other benefits to joining the GIC. Of course, it can help you address your OPEB liability, other post-employment benefits that municipalities are increasingly required to measure and to account for. There's just the hassle of having to negotiate, I guess, hassle. I'm sure labor wouldn't see it as a hassle, but it's from the management's perspective, it's a hassle to have to renegotiate that regularly with your labor unions. And they get the benefit, municipalities do, of being part of a self-insured group, but through a fully insured arrangement, because our municipalities pay a premium that's set at the beginning of the year. So there's a lot more choice that you can get from joining the GIC, but ultimately, I think what it comes down to is that actuarial evaluation that a city and town goes through that will drive that decision. I'm sure Commissioner Chapdelaine and others can add to that.
May I, Madam Chair?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Adam.
So I really, not very much to add to what Matt said, as he certainly knows better than I, but I think geography matters a lot, Commissioner Choate. I think, as we know, the GIC is very heavily weighted to the Boston healthcare market.
Mhm.
So if you're in the metro region, it makes a lot of sense and can save you money versus being rated alone or even as part of a joint procurement group. But if you're on the Cape or Southeastern Mass or Central Mass West, it could very well be that you don't get a financial benefit because your folks don't go to Boston-based hospitals. So I think that over the years, when we've seen communities look at it that aren't, sort of in that greater Boston region, it doesn't always work out from an actuarial or mathematical point of view.
Okay.
That's a good point. I see Melissa also has her hand up.
Yeah, I'll just add quickly to that. I actually worked in a community who did not end up joining the GIC and decided to do plan design instead. And a lot of that was actually a control issue more than anything else. They wanted to maintain their trust fund. They were able to do a different deductible that was slightly lower for our employees. So they didn't see as much savings, but they made a conscious decision to do that.
And then Bobby, I see you have your hand up.
Yes, I was just curious whether the choice of carriers has much to do with whether a municipality decides to join. In other words, if I'm curious, like, what percentage of municipalities or how many municipalities have carriers, enter into arrangements with carriers that we do not offer, such as Blue Cross, for instance. Because I'm wondering, like, if Adam, maybe you know how, or Mike, maybe you know, if that impacts municipalities' decisions.
Go ahead, Melissa. I think Melissa was going to answer that.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, I think that definitely plays in, especially when you have a community that already had Blue Cross and you're going to be telling employees they need to move. I think that's a tough kind of pill to swallow sometimes in combination with everything else that changes. And then in addition, I think, we do go out to bid every 3 years, like Matt was saying, and we are starting to see people like Blue Cross Blue Shield come into that bidding process where we weren't really seeing that before. So I think that's kind of a big change. So yes, I do think the carriers can play into it.
Thank you.
Just one other thing I'd note here, and I suspect that Commissioners Chapdelaine and Murphy Rodriguez will agree that changing plans, irrespective of what plans you're changing to, if you're changing that plan for your members, it's an administrative lift, a significant administrative lift, and it's disruptive to the membership to have to change, right? If a member's provider is in one plan's network and not in another plan's network, that's disruptive. So it's a substantial effort on the part of a municipality. So some municipalities may run the numbers of their claims to see if they can save, but even if they can save, a significant amount or a modest amount, they have to weigh that against the disruption and the administrative effort of making that change. So, and I think, particularly where we've been in an environment where for the early part of our current procurement, rates were pretty steady, both in the GIC and outside of the GIC. So it doesn't create the sort of groundswell to, more aggressively evaluate different options. And then we've had COVID where, changing anything around health insurance when people are concerned about their health and well-being is also, something that has to be taken into account. So I think for a variety of reasons, we have had this relatively stable portfolio. I think the question becomes, as our trend escalates and other trends in other plans escalate, does that start to shake things loose a little bit, particularly as we get on the other side of the pandemic?
Yeah. No, this is all really good dialogue around municipalities. I think as commissioners, we just see the opportunity for, getting more lives into the GIC so that we can have even stronger purchasing power. But at the end of the day, we know that there's a lot of nuances, municipality to municipality, and cost drives a lot of it, but also member considerations, constituent situations make a difference. So would love to see more municipalities join the GIC. I know we do a fabulous job and we have a lot of clout. And we'd get even more with more municipalities, but it's great to see the 45 that are in here continuing.
I will just note as well that we are thinking through how we may adjust our municipal strategy in the context of the coming procurement. So should we hopefully be in a position to present a better value proposition to our members and address underlying cost drivers in a real and meaningful way, that it will make it more attractive for municipalities. So we will be, and Mike and Erica have been working on this quite a bit, even just of late. We will be engaging with a variety of municipal leaders as part of our engagement strategy with the procurement to understand these dynamics a little bit better. I can tell you that we'll be talking with leaders in municipalities that are already in the GIC about their experience, those that have evaluated the GIC and chosen not to join. I think we have a lot to learn from them. I think we want to look at larger cities, smaller towns, different parts, different geographies within the state. So we hope that will provide us some helpful feedback that can inform, I I think an outreach strategy, a thoughtful outreach strategy that coincides with the procurement and makes it clear that as a result of the procurement that that they may evaluate our options and find them even more attractive.
Sounds good, Matt. Mike, do you want to go to the next slide?
Sure. Next slide, please. So for fiscal year 23, we have 14 municipalities and 1 regional school district up for renewal. The added wrinkle, as you'll see there, is our medical plan procurement process is projected to be completed prior to the December 1st deadline. So these communities will have certainly the added strategic benefit of knowing the outcome of that procurement as they weigh their options. You'll see those communities listed. There's a pretty broad cross-section of communities totaling 17,500 members, give or take. One of the things to keep in mind, though, is as much as the shifting dynamics of the insurance marketplace impacts the GIC, municipal organizations can be just as affected. For example, the exit of Fallon from the commercial market, as well as the Tufts Harvard merger, will impact individual cities and towns and purchasing groups just as much as it will the GIC. With that said, I actually believe that that marketplace also allows cities and towns an opportunity to take a fresh look at their options, and hopefully will spark a few of them to take a fresh look at the GIC. So with that, I'll just, Matt just sort of highlighted our municipal engagement, but we did over the summer meet with a group of municipal insurance consultants that work with our cities and towns in the GIC, and that also have clients outside the GIC. And we brought them up to date on our procurement process. And as Matt said, we'll be continuing to do that over the next month. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any remaining questions you have. And thank you for your time.
Yeah, so I see Tamara has her hand up, and I thought, Patty, you had your hand up and then you took it down. But go ahead, Tamara, please.
Thank you, Valerie. Can you hear me? Yep, good. 2 questions. Are the insurance consultants fully independent, or do they get a fee for recommending one entity over another? That's one question, because they have to be paid somehow. And the other question is that are we assertive enough in terms of personal contact with each of our municipalities, whether it's on an annual basis, whether it's every 2 years? In other words, you know, what else can we do for you? What are the things that concern you most? Those kind of questions, and especially educating the municipalities that are up for renewal in terms of how things are changing. In other words, the more information they have as to why the GIC is the best choice, and being very honest about it, not just a sales job, I think the better the decision will be made, not only for those that are renewing, but also for any new ones that we decide to, quote, market to. And knowing all the limitations we have discussed, I just wonder to what degree are we assertively communicating, educating, and marketing to the municipalities?
Well, I'll say 2 things, and then Mike may add to this. I think we do a very good job of staying in touch with those entities that we've listed here in these slides of municipalities that are currently in the GIC. I think, frankly, there's more that we can and will do to those that are not in the GIC, along the lines of what you're suggesting, Commissioner Davis. So certainly more to come there.
Right.
Yeah, I'll just add, in fact, we're working on, Commissioner, an update now that we'll be sending out to our municipalities. Even in some of the conversations that I've had with a couple HR directors, something like the exit of Fallon from the commercial marketplace. Some of that news, although it's there to the GIC, prompted us to try and redouble our efforts to communicate those decisions and let communities know well in advance of annual enrollment some of the different dynamics and changing plates that are happening. So
yeah, I think to that point, Mike, around the exit of Fallon, there are very likely several municipalities who were had their insurance through Fallon, who because Fallon is leaving the commercial market entirely, not just for the GIC, they'll be looking for options anyway. So I think there's probably a targeted outreach that we could employ there as well.
Yeah, and I was talking about basically sort of one-on-one conversations, and not necessarily annually, but on a regular basis, so that the municipalities know we're there for them, rather than just having an email, which is not what I would consider a one-on-one conversation, which takes time. I know that.
Hey,
The
Mel,
other
how you
question
doing?
I had was relating
Good.
to the
What are you
insurance
doing?
consultants.
I'm going on UMass to get my blood work and then running some errands.
Sorry, I think if everyone can put themselves on mute, that would be helpful. Thank you. We're getting some feedback.
Yeah. So what about the insurance consultants? Are they being paid based on who they select, or a fee, or how does that work?
I would say that those arrangements vary by consultant. They are hired by the municipality to perform a function that, of course, includes evaluation of carrier specific options, but also the GIC. Some or many of them do also receive financial compensation from a carrier that municipality chooses. So that is an area where, the dynamic probably doesn't assist the GIC. But I would say, our relationships with the consultants are important, as Mike noted, and we want to continue to be in regular touch with them. Look, I would say they're fair brokers, and if a municipality can gain from joining the GIC, irrespective of other financial considerations, those are long-standing relationships with municipalities. So I think they're good, fair, and honest brokers for their clients.
Okay, thanks so much. That was helpful.
Here,
I see your hand is up.
Calling on me?
Hi.
Commissioner Sullivan. Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
That's okay.
Matt, you mentioned earlier having conversations with our municipal partners who have either entered or not entered the GIC for whatever reasons, and the experiences that they have had, both positive and negative. My assumption there is that there'll be conversations with the unions as well from municipalities and in terms of their experience. I'm also curious, early when I asked the question about the 30-day expedited negotiations, or the issue of the PECs was raised and the 70% threshold to join. Is there any record? I'd be curious of the PECs that have taken up the issue and either have joined the GIC, or the ones that have not joined the GIC because they couldn't get the 70% threshold, and what the reasons for the denial might have been. That might be a useful tool. I don't know whether there's any records of that.
Yeah, I don't think we would have those records, because that's an evaluation and a process at the municipal level, but that's a really good point. I mean, I understanding those dynamics could be very helpful to us. And we have, to your earlier point, yes, engagement with public employee committee members is also on our radar. We've been talking with mass retirees about that, but I think we could benefit from yours and other representatives of labor to help us understand how to do that best.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, Mike, I don't see any other questions. I have enjoyed your presentation and update, so thank you. It's a good conversation.
Thank you.
Keep up the good work.
I just want to thank Mike. Yes, he does a great job for us in this space, and otherwise with our public sector partners in the legislature and elsewhere. Mike and I have had a few even recent engagements with a number of municipal officials that have included munis that are in and munis that are not in. So we will continue to do that.
All right, that's terrific.
All right, at this point, we hand it over to our CFO, Jim Rust, for the normal CFO update. Jim Rust.
Morning, everyone. Excuse me. Morning, everyone. Good to see you all virtually again. We didn't do an update last month. We just wanted to give you an update on where we were on the budget for this year. So if we could go to the next slide. So you might recall this slide. This is our weekly medical claims since the onset of COVID, more or less. And I won't go through this in detail, but a couple of things to note. Putting aside the noise where there's some big shifts, we are trending on a trend line continually upward towards pre-COVID levels of medical claims. It's been a little bit of a slow journey, and there's a lot of noise within this environment. As you know, there's been variants, there's been shutdowns, there's been various things that have impacted this, but the overall trend is an increase in medical claims towards pre-COVID levels, and it'll be interesting to see how this pans out with the new variant in the last quarter of this year as we go forward. Next slide, please. So these are the actual dollars paid since the onset of the pandemic, and as you can see, a similar run up in the fall here. Again, as there's been new variants and increasing cases, and also on the plus side of some of the spending, perhaps, and we can't really tease this out based on our paid claims. We'll get more of this out of the data warehouse at a later date, but there are more treatments and other things that are also being paid for, and those would fall under COVID expenses as well. So it's not just an increase of cases that could increase our paid amounts on this. It could be also treatments and other things that are happening at the medical facilities. Next slide, please. These are our paid claims. I won't spend a lot of time on this, but I think it's important for you to know to see where our money goes. It shows where we've paid and what we paid to each vendor. And there'll be some charts following this that'll show you visually what that turns into. Next slide, please. And this is the enrollee share, so the employee share of the same payments. So these are the payments out of the employee accounts. Next slide, please. This is where we are on budget. So this is our forecast budget versus our actual budget for the year. So we've got, the shape has been more or less what we expected. As you may recall from prior years, there's some seasonality involved and some pharmacy credits and whatnot that we know are coming that helps us shape the budget. But the shape of the spending has been more or less what we thought it would be, if not the total amounts. Next slide, please. And here's our budget to date. As you might recall, again, from previous years. I like this slide because it shows how big our budget is. It's a $2 billion budget. So the variance that we'll see on the next slide in the scheme of things is relatively small, and we're more or less on top of our expected budget for year to date. And last slide, please. From this, you can see that to date, we are under budget by approximately $37 million. I caution, which is about 3%. I caution that we did receive a fairly significant pharmacy rebate credit a month earlier than we expected. So I think this will normalize a little bit over the next month. Sometimes there's a timing issue. A week either way at the end of the month can shape a month-to-month budget variance. So I would say of this, about $20 million of that would be actual performance under budget, as opposed to just timing issue with the rebate credit. So I went through that fairly quickly. I know this is in your deck and we do it fairly often, so I didn't spend a lot of time on the details, but if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Yeah. No, thanks, Jim. I like seeing us on budget or a little bit below, but I'd also like to see, or at least get the assurances that people are getting the treatments they need. So still, we're under pre-COVID, hoping that people are still getting the treatments they need. I have a question. If you go back to the COVID numbers, the amount we paid out this November seems equal to what we paid out last November, or somewhere.
The $15 million.
Like when it started. So so it started in July. We had about 14 million in paid claims, and here we are in November. It's the same number. I mean, it is going down and then up. It's definitely clunky.
I think there's a few things going on there. Again, we can't quite tease it out by pay because we kind of pay it on a gross level. We don't have to break out. We will have that in the data warehouse later that we can look at. But I think the things we're spending it all on are probably different, like treatments that exist now this November that didn't exist last November, drugs that exist now that didn't exist last year, and more testing, perhaps different testing, those kind of things. And acuity of cases is also up, as we know, on some, and how they split that onto what's COVID and what's not COVID. So it's a different mix of things, not just volume, of cases.
Does it include vaccines?
If there were costs, if there were costs with vaccines, it would be in here, yes.
So the vaccine itself is, I'm sorry, the cost of the vaccine itself has been covered and continues to be covered by the federal government, but the cost of a provider to administer it is a claim that we see.
Right.
Okay.
So if there's costs associated with that, we would see that in here.
Okay. And then my next question is, are we getting any better data on, race and age and being able, not just with COVID, but overall, the plans finding ways to collect, race and age better than they had, so that when we look at our claims database and our warehouse, they were able to cut things by, minorities and age, all that, so that we have a better understanding by subpopulation of where we might be able to have a better impact or do more, or just know those differences.
Right. So Margaret Anschutz and her team are definitely working with our partner agencies on that on a continuing basis. I'm on those calls and in those meetings as well. So there's improvements on the way. I don't want to speak for her as to exactly where we are in that, but it's definitely ongoing, and it's a project that's very active, and we do see improvements coming soon. But I don't want to get ahead of the timing on her.
I want to be on the record that we'd like to see some improvements and movement by the health plans. And, I know it's a slow process. I just want to make sure they're continuing to work toward better data that is meaningful for us to evaluate how we're providing our services and care to members.
Yep, and I know we all agree on that. And the plans have been very cooperative. So I want to be clear they're on board. They're being cooperative, and they actually have some ideas on how they can be helpful on that too. So it's very, very much a cooperative exercise.
Okay.
Yeah, and we continue to lean into them on this. And I would say, in our annual stewardship meetings that we had in September and October, this was a specific feature that we discussed with them. So while we are working with our partners in state government, in particular, the Executive Office of Health and Human Services, who has a task force that is working to develop data standards, which is the real kind of holy grail here for us. So while that work is ongoing, we will look for the plans to really innovate here and come up with new and different solutions to help us understand those data points that you suggest.
Okay. All right. Thank you. This is good, Jim. I'm glad that you're not rushing through your presentation. We've given you enough time today to go through it. So thank you. The work you do is very important for us. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, just the other point I'd note on slide 17 there, I'm sorry, not 17, it was slide 18. We're approaching a COVID-related spend of $300 million. And, these are numbers and dollars, and they paint a particular picture, which is important for us to know. But that also means that, the disease burden of COVID-19 is substantial on our membership as it is everywhere else. So behind every one of these numbers is a loved one or a family member who ended up likely in the hospital, going through a really excruciatingly difficult and painful disease and recovery. So I just want to emphasize that, that we understand that there's a real human element here for us that we take very seriously. But it also highlights the importance of having insurance and having good insurance, because it means that when you do fall ill with some disease that can really be deadly, that your first worry is not how am I going to pay for it.
Yeah. No, well said, Matt. All right, I think we can move on. Thank you, Jim.
So that really, I guess we can go to slide 22. That concludes our formal agenda for the day. And if there's, I do want to open it up for any new business or other matters if commissioners would like to raise those. We often kind of breeze past this because we're out of time, but we're coming on time, but do want to give the opportunity for any commissioner that wants to put any things on our radar that we should be aware of.
So I see Bobby has her hand up.
Yes,
Bobby.
I don't mean to delay everyone, but I just had a couple of follow-up questions. One was, I think I raised a last meeting or maybe the meeting before that about the physical therapy and occupational therapy visits that were always approved for a minimum of 10. And now I think it was with Unicare that they have reduced that number. And I think I raised it. They reduced the number of approved visits initially to like 4 or 6. And I wanted to know what the outcome was of your discussions. That's my first question. And my second had to do with some retirees have expressed concern regarding Davis Vision. And I don't know if Jane has heard anything from or any complaints from retirees, or Matt, if you've heard that, in your town hall with retirees regarding responses from Davis Vision and their website being, very confusing.
So the right
I had
front wheel is like shimmying.
Sorry, if everyone could put their phone on mute, that would be helpful. We're getting some feedback again. Thank you.
Yeah.
So I think I will defer to Erica Shabelli on the question about physical therapy and occupational therapy. I believe, Commissioner, as a result of your inquiry about that, we did engage with Unicare to understand in more detail the change in their management and utilization practices there. And I believe they were returned to their prior structure. So I can't speak to the details here, but the issue you raised, from my recollection, has been resolved.
Right.
accurate, Matt. Vice Chair, as you might recall, I closed the loop with you on this after, I think, the last meeting. We had a member of our team, a couple members of our team, meet with the Physical Therapists Association to kind of hear out their concerns, but all the while we were working in the background to make sure that the issue was resolved, which it has now been.
And I do just want to note here that this is not a case of a more aggressive utilization management policy that was put in place by our carriers and that we told them stop doing that because it's disrupting our members. I mean, I think we do value different ways of utilizing care and in managing utilization. And in some cases, you know, there is value in us having our vendors more closely monitor and manage care of this sort. I would say, you know, when I asked my staff to look into that question, I made that clear that if there's a rationale and a benefit that we see from a utilization management practice, we want to understand it. And if it's warranted and merited and has value, we want to support them. If it creates more disruption than value it creates, then I think we want them to revisit it. So we're trying to strike the right balance here. But thank you, Vice Chair, for bringing this issue to our attention, and I'm happy we were able to resolve it.
Yeah, it was really a matter of a subcontractor that Unicare was working with, and that is the issue that was resolved.
Well, I appreciate the thoughtfulness, Erica and Matt, for dealing with this, and Bobby, thank you for advocating on behalf of your stakeholders. Much appreciated. So I don't see anybody else's questions or comments. So commissioners.
I'm sorry, Madam Chair. Yes. Bobby had the second question that I don't think I addressed about Davis Vision. We have had a few member issues come to our attention. I believe we did have a question or two that was raised during the retiree town hall. I can't remember the specifics of it. So, so that is on our radar, and we will look into that.
Thank you.
And I have heard no specific complaint or issue raised to me, Vice Chair Bobby, but I do want to say to you and to our chair, it's been a wonderful year, and I'm very grateful that I've had an opportunity to be part of this commission and witness the extraordinary work that is done. And hats off to you, Valerie, and to Matt, and happy holidays.
Oh, thank you, Jane. That's much appreciated.
Thank you so much, Commissioner. And I'm sorry, Valerie, you want to take us home?
Yes, yes. So thank you to everyone. I echo what Jane has to say. It has been an extraordinary year. I believe that we as humans and as members here have a terrific ability to be resilient, to adapt. The year has been just different, and yet we've continued to, and the staff particularly have continued to deliver care and services that are, I think, spectacular for the resources that we have. So, I'm really grateful for the opportunity to serve the Commonwealth, the state, the team here, and all of the commissioners. We have a big year next year. Let's not forget it's procurement. This means a lot of collaboration, communication with your constituents, letting them know that change may be coming, but the change is intended to give better outcomes, to give lower costs, to give higher assurances. The intent is positive to help members. So let's make sure that we go into the new year and into this procurement being as open-minded and open to change and the positive nature of why we want to change. So At this point, I'm going to use the opportunity, the power that I have as chair to end this meeting, to wish you a great holiday and to let you know we'll see you next year.
Thank you.
Thank
Happy
you all.
holidays.
Happy holidays.
Happy
Happy holidays.
holidays, everyone.
holidays.
Be safe.